Next question for either of you. Why are Fediverse alternative social media platforms like PeerTube, Mastodon, and Lemmy not catching on with much mainstream users?
Well, I mean, those platforms are very different from each other. I know why PeerTube isn't catching on with anyone, and it's because the amount of effort that it takes to make even the most simple video, even a simple unedited recording, is more than it takes to like post a tweet, off the top of your head, for example. And the reason that YouTube is so gigantic and really the only player in the online video space for like independent creators is because there is some return in value for the people who are investing their time to make content for the YouTube platform. And PeerTube doesn't have that. And it won't have that until you're like a huge creator who like gets income from other sources like Patreon, for example. So that's something that like Techlore is able to do, for example, kind of as a benefit to the community. We can host things on PeerTube, but it's because Techlore is already huge on YouTube and already makes income from like other sources that can kind of subsidize that sort of thing. But at the end of the day, anyone on PeerTube is basically subsidizing the experience for the benefit of their community. It's not really a viable alternative platform for YouTube. So it's not going to really catch on in the same way that YouTube has. Yeah,
Do
I
you
don't know if
mind
you
if
have
I?
more to add about that.
Yeah, if you
Yeah.
sorry, this might be a whole tangent on just PeerTube actually, but yeah, like we have to host our own videos. We have to pay for the hosting on PeerTube. So it's not like it's magically this like open source alternative to YouTube. Like people have to pay for it. Um, and so yeah, like Jonah was saying, like it's something we pay for monthly to host. Jonah hosts it with his servers, and then you'll see that I support I think either Privacy Guides or Jonah on GitHub through the Techlore account, and that's like how we're paying for PeerTube. Um, and the other thing too is I don't know, it's just really interesting. I guess this is where it's going to tie into the other things. I sent a little stat to you recently on Signal. Well, before I get to that, I find it really funny that you bring up the effort thing because I feel like that until you actually make YouTube videos, I feel like it's hard to see the amount of effort that it takes to make them. And it's something that I wish more people experienced. But I sent you a little chart, like a social media chart, and pretty much what it was the amount that people enjoy different social media platforms, specifically was it Gen Z or millennials? It was a
I
younger,
think it's Gen Z,
yeah,
maybe.
how much
So
Gen
yeah.
Z enjoys every social media platform. YouTube was the most enjoyed platform, more than Netflix. Netflix was the second most enjoyed. And then it pretty much devolves all the way to like TikTok and Twitter. I think Twitter was the worst. And what we kind of noticed was the general pattern was the amount of effort required to produce content for each platform was almost completely correlated with how much people enjoyed the platform. And I feel like the fact that YouTube requires so much effort, so much time commitment, someone can't just put out like some nonsense in a minute or less or 10 seconds, right? They actually need to put time into planning out a video, figuring out how they're going to present the video, recording the video, editing the video, publishing the video. And then it has to be a good enough video that people actually want to watch it. So YouTube just takes a lot more work than these other platforms. And like Jonah was saying, I can't imagine somebody going through all that effort just for nothing and just posting it on PeerTube, where they're not going to get either the exposure they want or kind of like the return on investment that they want. And I say return on investment because people have limited time in a day. A lot of people have full-time jobs, and you can't expect them to ever like sustainably keep up their channels only on PeerTube if they're getting started on PeerTube. So I just want to really echo a lot of what Jonah said. I wish there was a way. I think the best bet for PeerTube is if like tons of major creators all hop to PeerTube and it becomes a normalized thing. And even then, I think a lot of creators wouldn't move to it if there's no monetization model. Sorry to interject.
No, I mean, yeah, that level of effort thing is really, I mean, that's a famous concept in like computer science, for example. You'll hear this phrase garbage in, garbage out, where it's like, you can't get any value out of something if you're not putting anything in it to begin with. And that really is the case for, I think, Twitter especially. You can really tell that like the people who are putting content onto Twitter is really shaping how people experience Twitter in a lot of ways. And it's pretty negative.
Yeah.
But moving on from like PeerTube, as far as like the other alternatives, I feel like Mastodon, it's kind of found like a niche of people. I know a lot of people who do use it regularly, but I think a big part of it too is that, like for better or for worse, I think that video is really so much, video and photo is really so much bigger than text-based social media for like younger generations, especially. And I think that the way that social media platforms really take off is when um, like the younger generations, like even younger than me, like teenagers, for example, or like even younger than that, really start using these platforms. Like TikTok, for example, was really started because it was Musically before it was TikTok, and it was basically a thing where like 14-year-olds were singing along to pre-recorded music, and then it evolved into this giant like general video sharing platform basically. And Facebook is kind of a similar thing where it's like it really started in like the college age group of people and like at specific college campuses, and then it really grew into like this thing that a lot of old people use now. I'm not calling you a boomer if you use Facebook, but you might be. But it's that's kind of like the progression of this sort of thing. And I don't think that like just pure alternatives to the existing platforms are super enticing for most people, because Mastodon is basically the exact same experience as Twitter. It's just better, but I don't think enough people care about that. Like people are kind of stuck in their ways at this point. And if you're already on Twitter, it's really hard to get you to switch. And if it's not adding really anything new from an experience perspective, if the experience is exactly the same and it's just technically better, people aren't going to care. So it's kind of unfortunate, but I think that it's probably the only reason that Mastodon like really took off like a year ago was because like Twitter was basically shut down. And I think that that's what it would really take for it to catch on with the mainstream, is if like Twitter went away, I think you'd see a huge resurgence in Mastodon, for example. But as long as it's still up and hasn't burned down yet, I think that Twitter's still going to be around just because it has a lot of staying power, basically.
Yeah, I would say another factor just to add on to this, and it's not one I enjoy. I think there's something to be said about platforms that are designed from the ground up to capture your attention versus the ones that are not.
Mm-hmm.
And what that means for the general networking effect of that platform. And what I mean by that is platforms like Facebook, even Twitter, and even YouTube are kind of designed to capture your attention as much as possible within the platform. And the more time that you're spending on the platform, the more likely it is that people you know are going to be on the platform. If you're watching YouTube all the time, the more likely it is that when you're having lunch with a coworker, they're going to be seeing you use it and they're going to want to check it out as well, or you're just going to be talking about it more. It's going to be on your mind more. And I feel like Mastodon doesn't have algorithms. It just doesn't do any of the stuff that other social media platforms have. And I feel like it's competing against something that's meant to be a lot more addictive. It's like trying to sell a banana at a candy fair. Like no one's going to go for it. So I do think that there's something to be said about the nature of the platform as well. And it's something that we see on the forum as well, like on the Techlore forum. People check and they leave, which I think is perfect for the record. Like I'm fine with that because I want people to have a good relationship with technology, and the fact that people come in, they just get the updates they need and then they pop off is awesome. And then if you can engage in something that you know about, perfect. That's exactly what I want for the platform. But we could like totally make the forum like algorithmically generated. If you click this post, we'll start throwing pop-ups at you, and then we'll try to like like an infinite scrolling loop probably at the end of each post that automatically takes you to the next post. And then you're on the forum for as long as possible, and then we probably have a much better engagement on the forum. But my point is, like, that's not something I want to do. That's not something that Mastodon wants to do, because these platforms care just a lot more about the user experience. So I think that is a factor
Right.
working against them in terms of the networking effect, actually. And it's not a bad thing.
It really, really related to that. I feel like it's important to keep in mind that like social media, I think has conditioned us to like really want big numbers when it comes to things. We want to see a lot of users doing things. We want to see a lot of posts, but that's not necessarily how it has to be. And I don't think it's actually worse to have less people using a platform if like the quality is higher and you can use it more intentionally, because it's exactly like you said, you don't have to spend all day every day on Mastodon, for example. I have a much better experience on it because I just follow like small group of people who post about things that I want to see, and I don't need to constantly be like barraged with everything else going on in the world, like Twitter would do, for example, with all the news going on and all the trending topics and that kind of thing. I just can focus on posts from a specific set of people, and Mastodon works perfectly for that. And that is not a bad thing. And it means that I'll never use Mastodon in the same way that I might have used Twitter, for example. And I'm never going to be following a ton of people. I'm never going to be making content for like a huge amount of people either on these platforms. But I don't think that that makes them worse. It's just a different experience than traditional social media. And I think it's also perfectly fine the way it is right now. But there are some people I would like to join that on.
Yeah, and just a very, very quick mini rant. Someone said you can always use Threads as an alternative. Look, I don't care how good Threads is right now. That's not what I care about, because every new Facebook platform is good, and it starts good, and that's how they get people on the platform. With a flick of a switch, it's just not going to be that way anymore. Instagram used to be the clean, polished version of Facebook, where it was more focused and it was a lot more wholesome. And that's what Threads is. Oh, someone said that was a joke, Henry. Well, you triggered me real well. So good job. The person who said you can use Threads. But yeah, I'm just very critical of people who say that Threads is a good alternative to Twitter, because I think the way that Threads is going to go is going to be the same thing as Twitter. It's going to eventually have to be like an ultra monetized platform that's too algorithmic, and it will prioritize like this like user experience and the quality that we're talking about. So
Yeah. I mean, it has to be. There's no other way Facebook can afford to run Threads. I
yeah,
mean, it's a huge platform and it's completely centralized. You
yeah,
know,
come
you
on,
have
give me a
things
slash
like
s
Mastodon.
people. Sorry.
Henry needs the tone indicators, everyone. Include them on all your messages.
Oh god. Thanks for watching Techlore Clips. This clip actually comes from our main channel, Techlore, where we talk about digital rights, privacy, security, how to have a little bit more ownership of your data, and also just your tech in general. So if you liked this clip and you want to see more of what we do, check us out at Techlore here on the screen.